bass.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. Brought to you by funkandstuff.net, this is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine, musicologist, creative arts journalist, and multimedia pro. Whether you're watching the video version of this show or the audio-only podcast version, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support in this show. If you enjoy this programming, there are several ways to help support Truth and Rhythm, as well as contribute to further enhancements and expansion, plus get some sweet perks and rewards in the process. First, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Second, join Truth and Rhythm's new membership program through Patreon, which features 3 tiers for truth believers, truth seekers, and truth crusaders. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, which is loaded with awesome content, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk. Shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. Sponsorship opportunities are available as well. Contact me directly at scottg@funkandstuff.net. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm.
I'm delighted to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership singer, composer, producer, and keyboardist Leroy Burgess, whose 50-year music career includes being an original member of the soul dance trio Black Ivory, and beginning with its 1972 debut, the group would go on to release 6 albums through 1984, plus a comeback LP in 2011. Those yielded 7 top 50 U.S. R&B hits and a top 20 dance track. Apart from that, Burgess further distinguished himself with dozens of other artists, including Herbie Mann, Kendricks, Rick James, Aleem, Change, Kashif, Edwin Birdsong, and the Universal Robot Band. Leroy, thank you for joining the show. How are you?
That was quite a list. I'm not used to hearing it like just listed like that, but I'm well, thank you. How are you, Scott?
I am well. Thank you for joining the show. Much appreciated. Where are you coming to us from today?
New York City, not far from my home in Harlem. I'm in the Bronx, not far from Yankee Stadium, actually.
You know, such deep music roots there, and
Yeah.
You began singing at such a young age. Could you tell us a little bit about how you gravitated towards singing and when you kind of knew that you really had that bug?
My mom was a singer, and my family was brought up in the church. In my grandparents' case, it was the Pentecostal church. In my mom's case, it was the Baptist church. So I was born into that. And my mom had this amazing, beautiful contralto voice that she used to sing along with the records all the time in the house. So this is something that I heard from the time I was an infant. So not surprisingly, around the time I was 2 or 3, I was singing as much as I was talking. So, and I just loved music, and I loved singing. My mom loved it, and that's where it started.
And who were some of your earliest influences in terms of, singing and just being musical performers or presence in your life?
My earliest influence as a vocalist would be Johnny Mathis, because he was my mom's favorite singer. And back in the early days, 57, 58, so forth and so on, that's when he had all those wonderful albums and wonderful singles. And he had this amazingly immaculate voice that I like to listen to and imitate. So he was the first vocal influence on me, to be perfectly honest. Because I would sing along with all of those records. More came later, as the different genres developed and we came out of the romantic era into R&B, early R&B, Motown, Stax, stuff like that. I love Sam Cooke. I listened to a lot of his stuff. Jackie Wilson was also a favorite. So those were the influences the things that I would imitate when I was a kid. And like I said, I just loved singing. I loved the way it made me feel. So I did it a lot.
And when and how did you sort of get your feet wet, being up on stage and performing in front of folks?
I would say the most official performance would be after, in 1971, when we released the single "Don't Turn Around," and we performed for the first time at the Apollo. That'd be the first official one. There was a whole lot of performances before that. We won the talent show at Roosevelt High School when we were still the Mellow Souls. And we did a lot of little shows back in the day. In 1969, our manager at the time, Patrick Adams, was good friends with Gene Red, who was the manager of Kool and the Gang. And at that time, Kool and the Gang was entirely an instrumental band. They didn't do any vocals or anything. So it was suggested that they allow the Mellow Souls, which was the name of the group at the time, to come on and sing a couple of numbers. And so that was our first exposure to major crowds and stuff like that back in 1969 before the record was released. So that would be my actual first time in front of gigantic crowds. But I count the Apollo as maybe the first official time.
Yeah, the Apollo. That's really when you've arrived. That's exciting stuff for sure, especially being so close to where you hail from,
I was just glad that we didn't have to do amateur night. I mean, our first time there, we were hired as professionals. So I didn't have to go through the drama of amateur status and the amateur night audiences. I was a little scared of that.
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah.
That's very intimidating.
That's one of the hardest audiences in New York. But I made it. We did we had an excellent show. We only did 2 numbers, but the audience was very thrilled about it. The girls were screaming. It was crazy.
Now, is it true that you auditioned for Patrick Adams over the phone?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. We had scheduled for Patrick to come to meet us at Larry Newkirk's house. Larry Newkirk was the person who brought me into his group, the Mellow Souls, along with Stuart Bascom. He brought both of us in. And we had been rehearsing and putting together stuff and so forth and so on. And Larry knew Patrick, made arrangements for Patrick to come by. But Patrick, on the day that he was supposed to do that, he called up and said that he couldn't make it. During which time I was singing in the background. I remember I was singing "Can You Remember" by the Delphonics. Can you remember? And Patrick heard me singing. And he was like, "Who's that singing in the background?" And Larry told him it was the lead singer, our lead singer, blah, blah, blah. And Patrick called me to the phone. We spoke for a little moment. But yeah, that was the first time he heard us over the phone. I think either the day after or the following weekend, we went to meet Patrick officially at PS 92 on 133rd Street in Harlem. And that's when he got to really take a look, but he liked us from over the phone.
Wow, that's real lo-fi. If you can get over in that, you should get over in anything, I would think.
Well, I was impressed, and I was happy that I was disappointed that Patrick didn't make the meeting, but I was happy to hear that we had another meeting scheduled, and excited to meet Patrick because Patrick was just beginning to make his mark, his early mark in the industry. So it was a thrill for me.
What were your first impressions of him?
I wasn't, he was new to me, right? I had some awareness, and Larry had played a couple of records that Patrick had produced, early records on the Carlettes, right? And Ace, was it Ace Spectrum? The Spectrums, I think, was the name of the group. And I was impressed by the sound and by what Patrick was able to do. But, I was very timid when I started out. So I was like, just tenuous, tentative rather. And we went and met him, and he was rehearsing with another artist, Sophia Carlisle, right? And we had to wait until that rehearsal was finished before we got a chance to get on stage and show our stuff. And he immediately liked us. So it was cool.
And you were only 16?
Yeah, I was 16. I remember the year being 1968. So that would put me on like 15, going on 16 or something like that.
And the other two guys were a year older?
Larry was my age. Stewart was, a few months younger than I was, right? I think Larry was older than I was by a couple of months. And Vito was around Larry's age. So, we were all teenagers, latter part of teenagerhood, 16 and up, 15 and up, So, yeah, we were all kids.
So at that point, when you connected with Patrick, to what extent did he change your sound, if at all? I mean, what did you guys bring to it, and what did he run?
We didn't have a sound when we came to Patrick. We didn't. Mm-hmm. We were, like many other groups, we were performing, the records that we were familiar with and the records that were popular in our neighborhoods. So we were doing stuff by the Main Ingredient with the original lead singer Donald McPherson. Stuff by the Delphonics, stuff by the Moments, just all of the little songs that, made the girls had swoon for a little minute. So that's what, so when we got to Patrick, he molded us first in, stage presence and performance and harmonies and stuff like that, but then also working with and getting used to his material and his style of writing and the way he put songs together. And somewhere along the lines, Don't Turn Around was written.
Those first singles, I mean, to me, the most obvious influences to my ears seem to be, like the Stylistics and Jackson 5. Yeah. So how did you look at those acts and, what you guys were doing in terms of distinguishing, yourselves?
Well, I love the Stylistics because they were produced by my mother's cousin, Tom Bell, who was also the producer of the Delphonics, composer of the Delphonics. I'd fallen in love with his musical work way back then, the early Jerry Butler days. I fell in love with Tom Bell's work. And to discover that he was actually related to me was always a big deal. So I loved all the stylistic stuff that they did. The Jacksons I was proud of because that was another young man group or young teenager group that came out and had success. So to some degree, we emulated them, we admired them, and we followed their image. But more than the Jackson 5, we really followed the 5 stair steps. Kenny Burke, Clarence Burke, and the Burke Brothers group. We were in love with them from their initial records, Danger, She's a Stranger, and Come Back, that were done on Curtis Mayfield's label. So we followed them more so than following the Jacksons, but the Jacksons was always that great. It was always just a great Motown group, and we loved a lot of Motown groups already, Temptations, Four Tops, stuff like that. So that's kind of how that happened.
Do you remember, I'm guessing you do, the first time you heard one of your records on the radio?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I remember it quite well. That's when everybody had the little transistor radios, handheld transistor radios. No such thing as a Walkman or anything like that at that time. I was at high school, and I think we were in either lunch or one of the off periods, right? And somebody came by and said, "Is this your record?" And it was playing on WWRL, right, which is one of the big black stations here in New York back in the day, on the AM dial. And I was like, "Oh wow, that is me." And so before I knew it, it was all over the school, and it was a thrill. I was thrilled. I was thrilled that people were hearing it, but I was really excited that people seemed to like it and seemed to really be impressed by it. Let me turn this mic down just a smidge.
What was that? Don't Turn Around, or You and I, or
Don't Turn Around was the first record, right? That's when Patrick secured the job as A&R director at Perception Today Records. The success of Don't Turn Around prompted them to give us an album deal. Initially, it started with just a single deal, but that prompted them to give us an album deal. And the second single on the album, from the album, was You and I, which was actually my first commercial composition with Stuart Bascom. The two of us wrote that song, and that came out as the second single. And everybody was excited about the version that was on the album because it was a kind of a 7-minute long epic, kind of thing that, you just put it on and it's great for 7 minutes, 7 whole minutes, so it was cool. So yeah, that's where that came from.
How did you feel going into a studio and actually doing that for the first time? Did you feel, relatively comfortable, or was it something you really had to sort of warm up to?
I like singing a lot and I practice a lot. So I had an idea that I was, probably pretty good, or, I had something to say. So when I got into the studio, yeah, there was a little bit of butterflies, a little bit of nervousness, but I knew the song and I knew the work, and I knew I wanted to do my best. So that's what I tried to do. So it was exciting, my first time in the studio and, in front of the mic and, getting ready to print a record. That was very, very exciting for me. So, as you might expect, it is for for a young kid trying to make it.
Absolutely. How did you guys work on and come together with your harmonies?
A lot of that was me, because I had a good harmonic sense and I knew how to arrange vocals. So almost from the beginning, Patrick, kind of put me in the role of vocal arranger, because I just had these great ideas for harmonies and backgrounds, and I knew how to differentiate the different notes. I'm saying that word so horribly, sorry. Differentiate. So I was able to give Stuart or Russell their notes and then add mine, and it would be a blend, and then we developed our harmonies from there. But I always had a good sense of harmonic arranging. particularly vocally. So Patrick put me at that job immediately.
And how did you come to, the keyboards? Did you sort of just come to that on your own, or did you ever have any training? Or?
Okay. I started banging on the keyboards when I was about 4 years old. A very kindly babysitter who used to take care of me, named Mrs. McKinley, had a piano in the house. And she was very tolerant and kind and allowed me to bang on it, right? Eventually, she showed me little things like playing little melodies like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and This Old Man, He Played One, stuff like that. And before I knew it, I was able to, copy those little parts and stuff like that. That piqued my interest in playing piano. So every time I went back to babysit, she would teach me a little more and a little more. But then, she passed on, and I grew up, and I didn't have a dedicated teacher until I was 11 after that. My second teacher was a gentleman named Herbie Jones, and he was the chief rhythm and brass arranger and copyist for the Duke Ellington Orchestra during the time Duke was alive. He also worked at the community center of the project that I lived at, Drew Hamilton Projects. So I was just peeking over and watching him play and so forth and so on. And then I kept coming back. And then he said, well, show me what you can do. And I banged on the piano. I banged on the piano, but I managed to bang out a couple of notes that were, understandable to him. And he said, well, let me teach you how to play. And slowly he showed me fingering, how to understand the scales. He brought me my first understanding of jazz arranging and how jazz interaction happens. So he gave me my first insight into arranging and song construction and stuff like that. I was with him from age 11 to about age 16. And around 16 is when I went to Patrick Adams, and he began teaching me his craft. And between the two, I began to glean and develop my style, the things that I could learn to do and learn to play and incorporate into, what would become my work.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about the harmonies. Leroy, talk to me a little bit about the chemistry that the three of you had.
Okay. Another good question. We were friends and we were close, Stuart Russell and I. We believed in each other. We had a good formula together. And we liked hanging out. We still do. 54 years later, we still have just as much fun. Well, maybe not the fun of a teenager, but we have plenty of fun. And
age-appropriate fun.
Yeah, age-appropriate fun. And we enjoy it. So we were friends from the moment that we started working together. And as a result, we remain friends to this day. And we continue to perform. We continue to record and try to put out new stuff. May have a new record coming out very soon.
Well, we'll hear more about that before we sign off.
Okay.
Yeah. So, gosh, it must be just a kick to, still, have you guys all together still. And, you can never imagine back then that 50 years later, you guys might still be doing it, right? It's just an incredible journey, right?
Yeah. It's been amazing. But what's been the most noteworthy thing for me is to have our work continue to be appreciated and have the type of longevity that our work seems to have. I always wanted my material to be something that transcended time and it seems to be doing that. We're 50 years in, and they're still playing "Don't Turn Around" on a regular basis, Mainline on a regular basis. It's on somebody's playlist, let alone the other material that I've been blessed to be a part of. So that's a very cool surprise part of it.
For sure. Who were some of the first groups that you guys went out with on shows?
Okay, one of our favorite groups to perform with was Gladys Knight and the Pips, right? We went out with the Delphonics and the Moments all the time. All of the groups from the 70s slow jam era, we basically performed with the Shy Lights, the Temptations, Delphonics, of course, many times, Blue Magic, when they came out. And then we got to meet so many of our idols and the people that we idolized coming up as kids. We got to actually share stage with many of them, and that was just the coolest thing ever.
Did you ever get to go on stage simultaneously with any of those cats?
You mean we're performing together at the same time? No, not often. Usually we would be on their show or on a show together. They would do their performance, we'd do ours, and then the other groups would do theirs, and so forth and so on. It wasn't often that all the groups got together or multiple groups got together and did an encore ensemble type thing. But it was just cool to be in the building with them, you know?
No doubt. I mean, that's the golden era right then. I mean, you were right in the thick of it.
We got to be friends with a lot of them. I mean, we had very close relationships with Gladys and her brother Merrill, Bubba Wright, and we met a lot of people. We'd go from each other's dressing room, cracking jokes and just having fun. Particularly during the time that there were a lot of tours happening, and we'd see each other a lot, the different groups. So that was amazing. That was a wonderful time.
I was mentioning that was definitely the golden era of these soul singing groups. That's indisputable. But out of all those acts, is there any one you can point to that just absolutely killed it?
All of those acts in their different ways killed it. One thing about music, it's very infinite. So there's a lot of spots to be good at without, one transcending above another. So to me, all of them were good. To me, it was all great, dealing with the different styles and the different visions. And just being exposed to all of that. At that time, say if we did a show that had Gladys Knight and the Pips, Kool and the Gang, the Delphonics, the Stair Steps, and ourselves, right? In those 5 different groups, you have all different elements of R&B coming at you, right? And you're absorbing all of that, I know that I was absorbing all of that. And it basically would lead to the development of what would become my style, the things that influenced the way that I play and the way that I compose. So it was very cool. It was just like dope.
So with your singles and albums that came out, I mentioned all your chart hits in the beginning. But the top spot for you and I was 32, which I think was on the charts, your top record. I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm guessing that on the East Coast, maybe the airplay was heavier for Black Ivory than it was on the West Coast. I don't know if that's true. But,
absolutely. Yeah, sure. That and the fact that Perception's outreach, they had a national outreach to some degree, but their focus was on the East Coast, up and down the East Coast in the area that they where they were located. So we didn't reach the shores of California as much as we would have liked to become more of a national influence. But you mentioned chart numbers and stuff like that, and I kind of chuckled to myself because I've never really used charts as a barometer to gauge, you know, any part of my music. To me, if I just get one listener in one place, I'm good. If there's one person that likes it, and it's really not about the charts and all of that, I always took as a numbers game and a game of one-upsmanship. So it's something that I didn't feel belonged in the area of being creative. So I would, people would talk about the numbers, and it's number 5 and it's number 7, number 10 or number 6 or whatever. And I'd be like, that's cool. It just means more people are listening to it. But I never got really caught up into the numbers game at all. It's just like however many people decide to like your work, and that's it.
How do you feel that you guys progressed through those first few albums?
Okay, I'll be as honest as I can. On the Don't Turn Around album, we had a specific sound that was cultivated by myself, Patrick Adams, Stewart, and Russell, in that the four of us, the team of the four of us, basically wrote the album, basically put the concepts together and worked together on the realization of it. However, on the second album, Black Ivory, the group was performing, and Patrick was still helming as the A&R director of Today Records. So basically, when we came off the road and were ready to go in and do new songs, the album had already been completely written and designed for us. All right. And that was not reflective of the sound that we had in the previous album. So after the second album, we stepped away from Patrick for a minute. And that's when we did the single for Kwanzaa Records, What Goes Around Comes Around. But fortunately, we returned from, Kwanzaa was based out in California. And the company folded, I think, after a year. Which led us to get a deal at Buddha Records. And this caused us to reunite with Patrick Adams in trying to capture that original Black Ivory sound. And that's when we put out Will We Ever Come Together? And that was kind of the comeback into the Black Ivory sound with that album. And from there, we went on to produce ourselves after that, at that point.
Because we made it had definitely, to me, more of a main ingredient kind of flavor. And What Goes Around is sort of like, to me, like a BT Express meets the Miracles kind of blend.
Okay. What Goes Around Comes Around was something that we were excited to do because of the interaction with the sound of the people from the Philadelphia crew. That is to say, the musicians from MFSB and Norman Harris and all of the people that we admired. We admired their work so much. So we were excited about, doing that. And while it was a departure from, what was considered to be our traditional sound, it was fun to do. And that was always great for us. But like I said, from 73 through about 75, we were trying to find ourselves in terms of what our sound would be and what our sound should be based on our evolution to that point. So we were trying different things and doing different stuff, and I'd like to think wrote a lot of great material and produced a lot of great material despite what it might have done on the charts.
It's amazing how many singles Black Ivory actually put out. I mean, you guys really put out a lot of singles. From, you know, the amount of albums that you had, so many of the songs got put out on their own, which is interesting.
Yeah, that was very cool. Particularly from the Don't Turn Around album, there was a lot of singles that came from that. And on Baby Won't You Change Your Mind, I think there were at least 2 or 3 singles. Time Is Love was one of them. And I think Time to Say Goodbye was also a single on Baby Won't You Change Your Mind. On the Feel It album, we never did an album for Kwanzaa. We only did the one single. On the Feel It album, we started out with Will We Ever Come Together? And then that led to, we released Daily News as a single. We released a song called Love Won't You Stay as a single. And, you know, we just tried to put out whatever we thought might work.
To what extent do you feel that, you know, the changing waters, if you will, of music, then, you know, moving toward disco, affected Black Ivory and you guys trying to find that transitional sound?
It was difficult. It was quite difficult because, as often happens with soul groups, you can be typecast, and we were typecast as a slow jam group. So whenever we tried to do something that was up tempo or mid tempo or a little dancey, they was like, "Oh no, don't do that because that doesn't work for y'all," and so forth and so on. So for a while, because of the typecasting, we were held to that spot, right? And that was actually one of the motivations for me to have to step away, because I felt faster music calling at me that I felt I couldn't do while in Black Ivory or as a part of Black Ivory. I felt the only way to do that was to step away. And that's what began my in earnest relationship with Patrick Adams as a songwriter, co-producer, et cetera, starting with Personal Touches, It Ain't No Big Thing, and that evolved into Weekend by Freak. And right there, I was able to make the transition from slow jam artist into doing fast songs, and my fast songs being well received.
And you were still, what, just in your young 20s? I mean, you were still very young at that time.
Yeah, we're talking 77, 78. So I was 24, 25, something like that.
Yeah. Still when a lot of guys are just trying to get their career going in the music industry. So,
right. Well, Patrick had in the time that we had been away from Patrick, he made quite a name for himself as a producer, producing music, producing Cloud One, producing all of these great hit records, Inner Life, so forth and so on. So when I left Black Ivory, I went to Patrick for production work and keyboard work and background vocal work, stuff like that. And ultimately, that led him to asking me, you know, what compositions I had and what songs I had. And I think the very first song that I presented him with was Weekend. And he had the deal with Atlantic to do the Freak album. And Weekend ended up being the first single from that album.
How did it go over with the other guys that you were going to step away? You know, how did you negotiate or navigate through that?
Well, throughout late 1975 and 1976, I tried to express to them that I was unhappy and I felt stuck and stifled. They understood it to different degrees, all right? And neither of them were happy to see me go or see me step away temporarily, but they understood that this was something I had to follow my dream and follow my heart, and they supported me in that. And as it turns out, in 1978, 79, they called me back to assist them with composing a number of songs, one of which was Mainline, right? So we actually reunited for that project. There were 3 songs that I did on that project, and for a minute, we were back together, just not as signed artists on the same label.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.